welcome back to South African Prepper. So I've been asked a very interesting question on one of the international groups that we are part of, and the question was, how do we know that a collapse is currently taking place? Now, unfortunately, there is no universal answer to this question. One actually needs to have a look at what's happening in your specific country and your specific area, because it will differ. But there are some basic guidelines that one can follow to actually determine if a collapse is busy happening. Now, to understand a collapse, you will need to understand that you've got two types of collapses. You've got a gradual collapse. Now, a gradual collapse is where you have various things around you that are collapsing. One could be the stock exchange, another one could be the housing market, and then inflation. Now, these are things that might collapse, that might not filter down immediately, but over time this will basically impact on the way you live. It will impact on the services that you will be delivered. Let's say you have consistent water cuts or consistent power cuts like we have in South Africa. And then another example of a gradual collapse might be something like the government running out of money, people being unemployed. And a good example is Venezuela. That was a gradual collapse. And then our neighboring country, Zimbabwe, which is a very good example where we saw and witnessed the gradual collapse of the economy. So the second type of collapse you get is let's call it a instant or a immediate collapse. Now, this can be caused, and I can only refer to us in South Africa because we know what is happening in South Africa, and being a prepper, you need to know what's happening around you. You need to be aware of your political situation, because politics in South Africa plays a major part in our decision making for the future as well. And you need to know and you need to follow the news to understand what's happening in your area. So for us in South Africa, a sudden collapse or an instant collapse can possibly be caused by the power grid. Now, our company that supplies electricity to South Africa is a monopoly that is being managed and run by the government called Eskom. So we have rolling blackouts across South Africa pretty much every single day. We've actually gotten used to it. So a power grid collapse is an event that could spark an immediate collapse of an area or then a country. Now, if we talk about immediate, we're not talking about within an hour or within the same day. We're talking immediate refers to a couple of days, over a period of, let's call it 1 day to 7 days. So let's say the power grid goes down. You might not feel or recognize it immediately, but if the power grid stays off for, let's say, 2 or 3 days, going towards 5 or 6 or 7 days or a full week, it will then have immediate effect on the area or the country. If the power goes down for extended periods, you won't be able to draw cash, you won't be able to get petrol and diesel, you won't be able to buy food with your card. So that is an immediate effect that will have an impact on you as a citizen of that specific area or then country. In South Africa, another example is we have a big unemployment rate. We've got about, let's call it around number 12 million South Africans living off the SASSA grant system. So for us, if these people are not getting paid for that specific month, and they normally get paid from the 25th to about the 30th, if I'm not mistaken. So let's say for some reason the government doesn't have money and they don't pay these people their SASSA grant. You'll have about 2 million or 12 million, my apologies, 12 million And in South Africa, we're about 60 million people. So it's a big chunk of the population that will then literally go hungry. So for us, that is a sign that a collapse or a immediate collapse could possibly happen. Another thing in South Africa is laws and regulations. Now, in South Africa, the government is busy with a bill called Land Expropriation Without Compensation. And should this bill pass, this will give the government the power to literally walk into, let's say, a business or a farmland or houses, and they could literally go and knock on your door and tell you, listen, we are now expropriating your house or your farm or your business on behalf of the government. And that in South Africa could also spark what we call an immediate collapse of South Africa, because obviously people will defend their property, people will defend their property right. And South Africa being quite a violent country and a violent nation, I believe that this could possibly spark an immediate collapse. Another example of immediate collapse could be racial tension. Now, we've seen in America the BLM and the Antifa movements, and in South Africa it's very, very similar. You need to understand that South Africa is a multicultural or racial society. Me being a white minority, we are a small percentage of the population. But because there is a perception that certain parts of the population do own everything, and that is a political driven thing in South Africa, people could possibly from other colors or races could possibly go after another color or race because they've been told that another section of the population so the government has been telling everybody that a certain section of the population owns everything and has everything, and because you are poor and you're hungry, you should go after that specific section of the population. So to understand the collapse, you need to first understand what's happening in your own country. You need to understand what's happening in your surrounding areas. You need to literally go and identify the possibilities of what might trigger a collapse. Now, we're lucky in South Africa because natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis and things like that we don't really get. We do have big fires and we have big droughts in South Africa. So you'll need to make a list of what is happening in your area to be able to identify a collapse. Now, another thing added to this, once we have a grid down scenario, I've been asked this question as well, how will you communicate? And this is very important because once the power goes out, your cell phones and the internet might not work. And this is where a community is so important. We are a very large community. Most of us in this prepping community do have radios, so we will be communicating from different parts of, let's call it the area or the city, to try and summarize what is actually happening. We are in an extremely fortunate position by which we have members of this prepping community all over the country. And we have a central management system by which they can then gather information to actually see if the collapse or the anarchy is only in certain parts of the country, or if it's a thing that is national or happening throughout the full extension of the country. So that is why we are part of a community as well, because the intel from different people is so much more broader and so much bigger than if you would be prepping on your own. So yeah, make a list of the possible scenarios in your area to identify a collapse or a possible collapse in your country. Please like, share and subscribe and help us to grow this prepping channel of ours. Thank you very much, South African Prepper.